Jim Henderson's Black and Gold Rewind is sponsored by Nissan.
He pumps right, looks over the middle, catch made by Kamara, Special K does it again, a 10-yard touchdown reception.
The New Orleans Saints inch closer to postseason play with a home win over the New York Jets. Voice of the Saints, Jim Henderson, joins us now for his Black and Gold Rewind. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Meg. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So big win for the team yesterday, but why was this win such an unsatisfying one for Saints fans?
Well, I think, Meg, first it's hard to ignore the fact that you go in as the biggest favorite in Saints history, 15.5 or 16 points, depending on what line you're looking at. So you expect an easy victory, and you come out and score in your first three possessions, and it's certainly looking like that's going to be the case. Then the Saints kind of went into a scoring lull in the third quarter, which is oftentimes their best quarter. They were without their two starting guards, and that certainly hurt the running attack. And they made some mistakes that left a lot of points off the board. The two Coleman fumbles that came at the Jet 7 and the Jet 15, they could have been 7, 10, or 14 more points to add to the Saints' total.
Well, we did see big performances yesterday from Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara with 3 touchdowns between them. How crucial will performances like that be going forward?
Well, I think obviously the Saints' attack this year is built around those two running backs, both as receivers and running backs. And Mark Ingram had another great day in the 50-yard touchdown or 50-yard touchdown that sealed it for him in scoring 2 touchdowns. Kamara wasn't quite himself, but there wasn't an awful lot of running room either for these two guys through most of the game. And again, I think that's probably a product of the fact that Warford went out in the second quarter and Pete never played.
I like your nickname for him, too, by the way. Special K. That's good.
Well, you know, it's fun because it kind of reminds me of 2009 when you could kind of expect certain things to happen from certain guys. And so when I go into a game with Kamara, especially when he's back at full health, as apparently he was yesterday, you kind of try to think of something different to say about him because he's such an exciting and electrifying player. You hope to equal his performance in some way.
I think you did it. Well, you know, Sean Payton called the win a sloppy win. Obviously, there were 8 penalties, 3 turnovers in this game. As we look ahead to the big matchup with Atlanta on Sunday, the Christmas Eve game, what needs to change for this team, Jim? I mean, how are they going to clean it up?
Well, they've got out physical the Falcons, and I think they'll be certainly ready to do that based on what happened on that Thursday night game in Atlanta. I think right now all the emotion and all the momentum should go to the Saints, and it'll be interesting to see tonight too, Meg. Of course, the Falcons have got Tampa Bay. It'd be interesting to see how they come out of that game physically, how do they come out of it emotionally. It's almost similar to the Saints with the Jets yesterday. They'll be big favorites in this game, just as the Saints were against the Jets. There'll be the opportunity to look ahead, though nobody ever says they do that. So I think it'll be very important to watch that, and the Saints will certainly have to clean up some of these mistakes. They can't make the sort of turnovers down deep in Falcon territory like they did against the Jets yesterday and expect to survive. But it's going to be a great week in the build-up to this game, and hopefully the game will equal that build-up.
And hopefully we all get a nice Christmas present with a win. Thank you so much, Jim Henderson, voice of the Saints. Enjoy the rest of your Monday.
Thank you, Meg.
You can catch more of Jim's thoughts on the Saints today on Fox 8. Catch his award-winning commentary at 5 o'clock. The Black and Gold Review Show kicks off at 10:35 tonight. And then be sure to get your questions in using the Final Word feature on the Final Play app. It's 8-7.
How about this one coming up to, next week?
Just a little big, right?
A little bit bigger than yesterday's, which was not a classic. Next week could be a little different. Coaches and players try to abide by the 24-hour rule. You get 24 hours to savor a victory or to lick the wounds of defeat. And then you turn your attention to what's next while dismissing what was. I doubt it took the Saints players and coaches 24 minutes rather than 24 hours to do so after yesterday's victory over the Jets. What's next is the opportunity to retain first place in the NFC South. Who's next are the Atlanta Falcons on Christmas Eve. The most magical night of the year, the combination could hardly provoke more anticipation. The road to the NFC South title for all the contenders, the Saints, Falcons, and Panthers, could be said to go through Tampa Bay. The Bucks get all 3 in their final 3 games, beginning with them hosting the Falcons tonight. Atlanta's challenge will be similar to the Saints yesterday, not to overlook an opponent most regard as merely a speed bump in that road with the game of the year on deck. Obviously, that game tonight will be must-see TV for every Saint player, coach, and fan. But the beauty of the Saints' position is that tonight, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, the Saints need only to watch one scoreboard, their own, to determine their playoff destiny. The late Al Davis said it often and said it best. Just win, baby. Vince Lombardi put it another way. Winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. They were both right for the Saints right now. So let the buildup begin.
I mean, forget it. It's the Falcons. You had that Thursday night game that was that Thursday night game. Your Christmas Eve in the Dome. I mean, it's going to be
just 2 weeks later.
It's going to be crazy in there.
It will. You know, David and I were talking before I came up here about when was the last time the Saints were involved in a game this late in the season with this big a playoff implication. We're going to have to do some research on that.
That's a good question.
It is a very good question, especially when you've been 7-9 the last, 3 years?
Yeah, no kidding.
And 4 of the last 5. So certainly hasn't occurred recently. We'll look into that. Another good question by David. He's all over the place.
Very smart.
He's not just a meteorologist.
He's not just that.
And it's a Monday.
It is.
He's on his toes.
He's on his game.
He goes downhill quickly.
He does. Wait till Wednesday. Thanks, Jim.
He'll be out to lunch.
All right, Jim returns tonight. We're not done with him yet. He's going to answer your questions about the Saints. Use our Final Play app to submit a question. Get answers during Jim's Black and Gold review. That starts right after Fox 8 News at 10.
Jim Henderson's Black and Gold Review is sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealer, built Ford tough. And 2017 Nissan Titan. With America's best bumper-to-bumper limited truck warranty, Nissan Titan. Take on any job. And Slidell Memorial Hospital in partnership with Oshner.
Snead is a wide receiver to the near side of the field. There's a quick slant and a touchdown for Michael Thomas. The third time is the charm.
The Saints needed Michael Thomas to be great yesterday, and he was. Welcome into the Black and Gold Review show alongside the man whose name is on the moniker, Jim Henderson. I'm Juan Kincaid. Jim, the moral of Sunday's game was winning ugly is okay, right?
It's okay. The whole idea was get in, get out, stay healthy, go home. And for the most part, they did.
They did all those things. Let's get you right to the headlines. Headline number 1, uneasy on a Sunday morning.
Oh,
blah, blah. What a rainy day. What an awful day to be at a football game.
It was, and there were so many reasons why there was no great atmosphere surrounding this game in the Dome. The weather was a part of it. The fact that you got the Jets, a team that is not a traditional rival. You only see them every 4 years. No great stars on that team. The Saints favored by 15.5 to 16 points. All those things contributed to it. The fact that it's around the holidays. If people are going to spend their money, they're probably not going to make a last-minute decision to go to this game, especially considering what they'd have to go through to get there with all the rain surrounding the Superdome. So for all those reasons, there was not much atmosphere in the Dome, and I think the best you could have expected out of this game was no great drama, no classic game, just get a victory under these circumstances as the Saints were able to do.
Even Sean Payton mentioned at the end that maybe his players were doing a little scoreboard watching if they played very sloppy. The game coming up next, the Atlanta Falcons, we know the history, which happened about, what, 7-8 days ago? We know how much people are looking forward to that game. Maybe that played in the fact that people were staying away.
Probably so. I mean, you're just coming off the huge game previous against the Falcons, and now you get this. We refer to it, I think, in the open as the meat in the sandwich between the loaves of bread or the pieces of bread that were the Falcons. So
I think yours are croissants, right?
Nothing but croissants.
No doubt. Let's get to headline number 2. Painful win. Painful to watch. Just a painful game to just sit through. And you had to broadcast it.
Yeah, and somewhat painful for the players as well. I mean, they lose Larry Warford. We don't know for how long. Hooman as well, both to concussions. Hopefully they'll be back. But yeah, it was the sort of game where you're a big favorite, as we mentioned. You score on your first 3 possessions. You never trail in the game. You're never tied in the course of the game. So you always felt, yeah, the Saints are going to put this one away. But then they stalled in the third quarter, as oftentimes they do when you get out so fast. You had touchdowns called back, 2 to Michael Thomas. So it wasn't the kind of game that put you on the edge of your seat at any point in it.
Can't remember the last time I watched the Saints play a game where they had 3 turnovers, and yet I still never felt like they were going to lose the game. The Jets are just that bad of an offensive team with a backup quarterback.
Yeah, and they didn't really put him at risk very much. His passes were quick. That's why the Saints didn't have a tremendous pass rush. That was a part of it, at least. The Jets were going to be very conservative. This was not a kind of guy in Bryce Petty that you want back there throwing the ball 50 times. So they were going to rely on their running game as much as they could, and they were going to try to throw short passes, control the ball as much as they could to keep it out of the Saints' hands, which all made for a pretty lackluster game.
I think last year they may have lost the game like this. That's the difference between last year's team and this year's. All right, headline number 3, Kamara's comeback, fresh off the concussion in Atlanta, that extra day's rest helped from the bye week.
And this, to me, was one of the things that was really made it interesting to watch this game, was just to see, could Alvin Kamara come back and equal what he was prior to that first series against the Falcons? And while the running game was pretty much held in check, Kamara-wise, and for a degree, Ingram as well, he still contributed in the passing game. He still did many of the things that he was doing prior to the injury, and he's now one of 4 rookies in NFL history to have 5+ rushing touchdowns and 5+ receiving touchdowns. The other 3 are enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You know, that's Doak Walker was with the Lions. Charlie Taylor was a multi-purpose wide receiver running back with the Redskins. Gale Sayers, we all knew what he could do. And now Alvin Kamara is a part of that group as well, coming out of concussion protocol to be the kind of electrifying player that he was prior to it.
And we asked the question after the Atlanta game, why did this offense have such trouble getting right again once Kamara went out of the game with a concussion? Well, you saw yesterday, Jim, he had 18 touches of the football. I mean, that's nearly a quarter of the plays they ran yesterday. I mean, he is very involved in this offense. It is really built around him. It seems like first and Drew Brees second.
And because he's so multifaceted, and the Saints don't have the weapons they had in the past without a Brandon Cooks. They have nothing in their tight end game when it comes to the passing attack. They don't have a real complement with Ted Ginn out there, to Michael Thomas in the passing game. So he's had to take on more and more of the load. And he's such a versatile athlete that he confuses defenses by how many places he can line up and what they have to adjust to as he adjusts the offense.
All right, headline number 4, we want to talk about Michael Thomas. A fantastic fourth-quarter drive by the Saints, and it highlighted Thomas's entire skill set. In fact, Drew Brees pointed out after Sunday's win, 9 receptions, 93 yards for Thomas. He's just a fantastic player that shines in the moment. Here's what Drew had to say.
Yeah, it was superb. You know, he had a big 3rd down conversion, then he went up and made a great play. Might have been the very next play, or soon thereafter. And then obviously the touchdown catch. Just a, you know, tough physical play on his part. Really that entire drive, you could just, I mean, you could see it in his eyes. He was, you know, he wanted the ball and he wanted to make the plays.
Jim, we talked about at the beginning how Michael Thomas wanted the ball in this series. He wanted to be the guy to step up and lead this team to a victory because other guys around him not doing their part.
No, and he just doesn't have the compliments he had in years past. Now, when they got rid of Brandon Cooks, it was with the idea that Michael Thomas could step up to the lead role. He's not Brandon Cooks when it comes to being a deep threat, but he has to be the #1 guy, especially now with the injuries that they've had in the passing game. And he certainly has been. 9 catches for 93 yards, 1 touchdown, could have had 2 more. He had 9 of the Saints' 13 receptions by a wide receiver. So, and obviously, defenses have to be concentrating on him because, for the most part, he is the Saints' passing game.
He had 1,137 yards last year and 9 touchdowns. He's well on pace to surpass that perhaps by the next game. He has 1,085 yards receiving right now. He's been as good as you could have ever expected to be in year number 2. Special player.
Well, what's he equaled, what, Odell Beckham Jr., right? As the only other guy in NFL history who's had more than 900 yards and receptions his first 2 seasons in the league.
5 touchdowns. We'd like to see him get into the end zone a little bit more. All right, headline number 5. Best guy on the defensive side of the ball for the Saints seems to be week in and week out, Cam Jordan. The Jordan effect. Jim, is he the most unappreciated defensive lineman in the game?
I think he probably is when you look around the entire league, because so many people, and he made this mark, and I think Dennis Allen did last week too, late in the week, lots of times people who don't see him play every week, they look at defensive statistics and they're just looking who are the leading sackers. But we have the privilege, and I think that's the right word, we have the privilege of watching him week in and week out. He never takes a play off, he never takes a day off, he plays all over that line. He's lost his complement as a pass rusher, and Alex Okafor, he's in tremendous shape, he's a leader, he's charismatic, and while even now he's somewhat tooting his own horn, and rightly so, I mean, he had probably more passes defended yesterday than the Saints secondary did.
He's on a team that's 10-4. They don't have any complement to him on the other side of the line, rushing the passer. He has 55 tackles this year, only 1 tackle on Sunday. 1 quarterback hit on Sunday, has 10 sacks this year, has 10th in the NFL. But what he had, the knockdowns, I mean, he had 5 yesterday, 4 officially, maybe a 5th as well. He's been consistent in doing that all year long. He does everything, all the little things for his football team along the line. It kind of makes up for what they don't have.
Well, you talked about that 5th one. That doesn't get credited as a statistic when he broke up that 2-point conversion. But look at how big that was to do that, to deprive them of a 2-point conversion. I mean, they make that 2-point conversion. That would have enabled the Saints to have an onside kick, although it was late in the game. and then go down and kick a field goal to tie. When he deflected that attempt at a two-point conversion, then they had to recover an onside kick and go down and score a touchdown to win. So he's doing all the little things and all the big things, and he's certainly a Pro Bowler, and he's probably an All-Pro.
He's tooting his own horn, and deservedly so. Anybody else on this roster you think gets consideration? Is Marshawn Lattimore the only other guy?
As far as being All-Pro or Pro Bowl?
On defense, Pro Bowl.
Oh, I think Marshawn Lattimore's in. Otherwise, defensively, I can't really see anyone on the rest of this defense who warrants Pro Bowl consideration. Certainly Michael Thomas on offense. Drew Brees will be right up there. Mark Ingram has to be right up there. Alvin Kamara. So, you know, it's funny, like I remember early in the season when it came about midway through, we talked about who would you consider for Pro Bowl consideration, and there were more guys on defense than there were on offense, and now this offense has blossomed.
You're right. It's been a nice thing to watch this team kind of blossom into what they are right now, which is on the verge of being a playoff team. All right, so much more to get to here on the Jim Show. Turnovers and third down problems, a couple of glaring flaws on full display Sunday. We'll answer your questions about the offensive shortcomings. And a segment that Jim has wanted to do for weeks now, things that make you say, we make sense of the quandaries and conundrums of the NFL. That's next.
You're watching the Jim Henderson Black and Gold Review.
Welcome back in. This is the segment that Sean Vazan is usually joining us to break down the film, but instead of spending the time in the film room today, he's been in the delivery room of all places. Sean and his wife Ashley are on baby watch right now, expecting their second child, and we send our best wishes to them. And Jim says hurry back because he can't continue carrying this show.
No, I miss him so much. This is his segment. This is when you and I, we kind of doze off usually.
Pretty much.
And he takes it.
No doubt about that. But instead, we have a new segment today for 1 week only. Hondo's things that make you say,
Can you tell we're filling without Sean here? This might be a part of that.
Sean's a talker. But hey, our first thing to make you say, why do some touchbacks go to the 20 and others go to the 25, Jim?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, you kick off and it goes through the end zone, it comes out to the 25, you punt it into the end zone, it comes out to the 20. I don't know. But here's the big play as far as touchbacks go, and this is what's creating so much stir. Not only this, but a Carson Wentz incident earlier in the season. Stretching out the football, fumbling through the end zone. The ball goes over to your opponent at the 20-yard line on a touchback. Why? You can fumble anywhere else on the field out of bounds and even have the other team touch it but not gain control, and it's still your ball. To me, that's way too punitive. If this occurs and you fumble through the end zone, as Carson Wentz does there, it should still be your football, but not at the point where you lost it. Perhaps give it back to that team at the 20. It's gaining more and more momentum after yesterday.
All very good points. A lot of things for the owners to talk about in the offseason. How about the catch or not a catch situation? Last night's Steelers-Patriots game, Jim, Jesse James, catch or not a catch?
Well, you know, the more I look at it, I think they eventually got it right. I don't think it was a catch. But, you know, it's supposed to be clear and obvious evidence visually to reverse a call. And if it is clear and obvious visually, why does it take them so long to make that determination? Because obviously it's not clear and obvious.
Sean and I went through this whole play last night. He was convinced it was a catch. He said, look at the guy's left hand when he hits the ground. Because he's catching the ball in the motion of going to the ground, he hits the ground, his left hand turns, the ball moves, incomplete pass. You know, this all takes me back, Jim. Takes me back.
Takes you back.
The Bird Emanuel, the Bucs, first year of the replay rule. This one overturned against the Vikings. I thought this was a complete catch, but the referee said no. What say you? You were about 65 at this time, so what say you?
I was in the home then, and we weren't allowed to stay up that late.
And it was on black and white, too,
yeah.
right?
I wonder if that was Sean King throwing the football, the old Tulane quarterback. I don't know, it might have been. But, yeah, this was one of them.
Our producer, John Bennett, says yes, it was.
All right, there you go. See, I must have been awake for this one. Then there was the Des Bryant non-catch.
The Calvin Johnson.
The Calvin Johnson, which Calvin Johnson thought he'd caught the game-winning touchdown, put the ball down on the ground to celebrate, and they said, no, that didn't complete the catch. The thing that really bothers me is the whole idea of surviving the ground. Now, a runner can survive the ground, but a receiver can't. And how long do you have to survive the ground? And what constitutes losing control of the football? And the one that always gets me is, you know, you've made the catch in the end zone, you're about to go to the ground, you get hit, you're driven out of bounds, you're 5-10 yards out of bounds with the ball on your chest, and maybe it moves a little bit, it never touches the ground, now you didn't complete the catch. I mean, you hear the network guys complain about this every week. You'll hear John Gruden every week talk about, I don't know what a catch is in the NFL anymore. Al Michaels was saying the same thing last, and I'm sure Jim Nantz and Tony Romo do as well. And I don't know how they get it right. You know, every year they add more verbiage to it to try to make it simpler, and yet it's more obtuse, I think, to the average viewer. I don't know how they cure it.
Instant replay has both helped and hurt the NFL at the same time. All right, so you know, the referees actually got a couple plays right yesterday with the Saints. First, the Mark Ingram non-touchdown call here. It was the right call, so it would seem, upon further review.
Well, they wondered why Sean Payton didn't challenge that.
Exactly.
And the reason was the whistle blew. Yep. The whistle blew because they thought he had stepped out of bounds. Now, the officials are really instructed to let the play run and then get it right on replay. But because the whistle had blown, the play is dead, and Sean Payton couldn't challenge it. But there were a couple others, much to the chagrin of Michael Thomas, that they got right. And to me, this is the real value of replay, is figuring out if you're in bounds or out of bounds on plays like this. And I think on both of these, they got them right. To the naked eye, when you're behind the play, that looks like a touchdown. But with the angle that they showed, clearly his elbow got down to the ground before the football broke the plane. And then the one at the back of the end zone, again, to the naked eye, it looks like a touchdown. But when you can slow it down, you realize that the toe of, I think it was his left foot, was out of bounds. So they got both of those right. And much to the chagrin, I said, of Michael Thomas, because he could have had 2 more touchdowns. He finally got one, his only one of the day, but he could have had 3.
Which was a big one. You're right, he could have had 3. That was a big one. The last one put the Saints up by 11 points. All right, get to a viewer question right now, because we've had so many questions about different things submitted on the Final Play app using the Final Word feature. Although we have seen the Saints play strong in all areas, it seems that we are missing strength at the tight end position and wide receiver. Michael Thomas is incredible, but it seems we are missing a long threat and the bruiser's strength and hands on grip of Jimmy Graham. P.S. Really missing what Snead used to bring. Now, Willie Snead did have a big catch in yesterday's game, about a 25-yard reception.
But it was his only one.
It was his only one. And again, that is part of the problem.
Yeah, and, you know, as much as we used to get on Kobe Fleener, we made the remark in this show when they lost him for the season, he was really a big fourth-quarter target for Drew Brees. And now they have no one in the passing game. Josh Hill had their only reception at the position yesterday. They might have lost Michael Ho'omanawanui for the rest of the year, or at least for the next week or 2 with a concussion. So that gives them Garrett Griffin, who they've recently brought back to the team, I guess off the practice squad. And they've got Josh Hill, who is mostly a blocker. So they're getting nothing out of the tight end position. You knew they would miss Brandon Cooks. We thought perhaps Brandon Coleman would be that guy in preseason. When we saw him in practice, he really looked like he transformed his body, his speed, his aggressiveness, that he was going to be that down-the-field guy. He's proven to be pretty much what we thought he was for the last couple of years, and that's primarily a blocker and a really good one, but an inconsistent target and certainly not a deep ball threat for the most part. So,
but I think you also thought that Willie Snead would give you more than he has, and the off-the-field issues hurt him. Also coming back to training camp over in London when we first saw him dealing with the hamstring issues, it's really slowed down his progression. The 900 receiving yards almost last year, not really much this year. That's kind of hurt them as well.
But too, what's hurt those areas of production is the fact that now that they go to their running backs so much. You know, they've both become tremendous receivers out of the backfield, in particular Kamara. So those passes that might have gone to a Willie Snead in certain situations or to a Kobe Fleener, whoever's at tight end, are now going on the periphery to these 2 guys.
You're right about that. All right, coming up, the Saints could end up as high as the #2 seed in the NFC or out of the playoffs entirely. We'll peek at the playoff picture next.
You're watching the Jim Henderson Black and Gold Review.
All right, welcome back in. We reached that point in the show and that time of the season when everyone's talking about playoff positioning. And this question comes in from Ralph in Lockport. He wants to know, can the Saints still get the #1 or #2 seed in the playoffs? Now, #1 is not attainable because the Eagles hold it right now. The Vikings are the only team that can really take it. #2 can happen for the Saints if they, of course, first have to win out. Vikings lose out. Rams lose 1 of 2. The Saints can get the #3 position if they win out. The Rams lose 1 of their 2 games. Now, the Vikings will play the Packers on the road and the Bears. The Rams will play at the Titans and will host the 49ers. As far as catching 1 and 2, it's just there's too much space between the Saints and those teams are playing really well right now.
Yeah, I think for the most part, what you can say as a Saints fan, it's going to be more important to dwell on who's chasing you rather than whom you're chasing, because you're probably not going to move up in all likelihood. You got to worry about these other two teams in the NFC South catching you. And there's certainly some other teams involved too, but first you got to take care of business in your division, as the Saints have thus far and need to in their final two.
So if the season ended right now, the Saints would be in, obviously, and the Panthers would be in, and that's who these teams would play. It will be a third time going against a Panthers team that looks a lot different now than they did the last two times they played.
Yeah, that game against the Packers yesterday, even though Aaron Rodgers was coming back, he was, intercepted like 3 times. There was certainly some rust on him, but that's take nothing away from the Panthers, because they're playing about as well as they have all season. Cam Newton had 4 touchdowns yesterday, 50-plus yards rushing. Now, he's done that combination twice in the season. McCaffrey had 136 yards of total offense. But the big thing was that Greg Olsen was back, their excellent tight end who's been sidelined much of the season and ineffective early on, coming back off that broken foot. He had 18 touches yesterday. 9 receptions for 116 yards and a touchdown. Big thing that came out of that game, besides the off-the-field problems the Panthers are having currently in the front office and in management and ownership, is that Thomas Davis got a 2-game suspension for an unwarranted hit, an unsportsmanlike conduct hit. The second one that he's incurred, he's appealing that. But I wouldn't be surprised if this one stands up. You've seen others cut from 2 to 1. Because he's a multiple offender, I wouldn't be surprised if this stands up. But their defense is as salty as ever. The big improvement for the Panthers in recent games has been their offense. And you know, everybody says, too, back when the Saints played them the second time, I remember the people with the Panthers saying, I think we'll see you guys again, probably in the Dome. It's hard to beat a team 3 times in a season. The motivation would be theirs. But that's a team I don't think you want to see in the playoffs.
I think you're right about that. All right, still to come, the Saints and Falcons first meeting made for one of the best Thursday night games of the year, and now the stakes are even higher for the grudge match. Just how much will emotion play a factor in this pivotal contest? We'll break it all down next.
You're watching the Jim Henderson Black and Gold Review.
So it's on to the Dirty Birds now. I feel like we just played them, 2 games back? Big game here, maybe of historic proportions?
You know, it might be. We were talking about this in the sports office. We put our crack research team to work, meaning John Bennett, our producer. Is this the most meaningful game with playoff implications for the Saints since when? We went back to the 15th game of 2013 when the Saints lost to Carolina 17-13, and in the process, with some other results, fell from the 2nd to the 6th seed. This is the biggest game, we think, since then.
Let me ask you this. Is the biggest Saints-Falcons game in the Dome since 2006's reopening?
It could be. And that it will always have to be a distant second. Everything will always have to be a distant second.
Maybe the biggest hyped.
Yeah, I mean, the hype's going to be huge this week, and for good reason. A great division, 2 excellent teams, 3 excellent teams. It comes down to this, and especially the fact that it is the Falcons. Now, if it were the Panthers or the Bucks or somebody like that, it wouldn't be nearly as big as this.
I think you're right. Until then, for Jim and everyone here at Fox 8, I'm Juan QK. Thanks for watching. Our next newscast is at 4:30 in the morning. Have a good night.
From Fox 8 Sports, this has been the Jim Henderson Black and Gold Review.